people will still be drifting in.
I hit record, so we're
okay.
good.
Okay. Hi, thanks for allowing me to give you an update as to what I've been doing besides teaching a class at Bryant University. I think sometime in February, I was asked to take part in this 100-day transition team for governor, for the newly appointed governor of the state of Rhode Island. And since that, we've met 3 times. The third was yesterday, or maybe it was the second. We've met 2 times, and the second was yesterday. The idea of our transition team is that there are, I think, 11 committees dealing with everything from housing to different sectors within the economy, different things, everything from transportation to health, COVID, vaccinations, and then although not in any particular order, but we seem to be on the bottom of the list, was this section called Energy and Environment. So I got placed on, or I asked to serve on the Energy Environment subcommittee within this larger group known as the 100-day transition committee for newly appointed Governor McKee. So of the 2 times we've met, we've been asked to come up with a list of recommendations on where the governor should focus, and the governor's office should focus their energies on within the state of Rhode Island, within the context of energy and environment. So different policies, different regulations, perhaps a new way of thinking how best to utilize the governor's office in terms of what is happening in the state in terms of the energy and environment. So what I've been trying to do was to move this into a wider world, and not just from the perspective of one individual who is thinking or rethinking of what might happen or could happen. So I've been trying to hold some of these listening sessions, and I apologize, I've really only got about 6 minutes, then I've got to get back and turn into a lab instructor at Bryant University. What I'd like to do is to spend a few minutes listening to you here, and then afterwards, if you have any suggestions, and I'll give you some examples in a minute, but any suggestions on policy changes, new ways of looking at the energy sector, the environment sector. As Governor McKee has pointed out to all of us, he's interested in, and I'll do air quotes, new voices. He's interested in listening to new voices when it comes to both of these main topics. So, for example, yesterday we talked about a number of different issues. One was a bottle bill for Rhode Island, and again, these are just examples of areas that might be of a primary focus with the new governor. The end result of all of these would be for this particular section to write up a report listing, and I think yesterday we were talking about 5 or 6 main issues that should be addressed during the next term for Governor McKee. So for example, yesterday we talked about a bottle bill. We talked about composting in municipalities, how there's not more of it. The landfill in Johnston, we talked about Biden's executive orders. I spent a good portion of that talking about that and how that might impact both the economy and the environment in the state of Rhode Island. I think there were maybe another handful of topics ranging from permitting issues through Rhode Island DEM, the lack of staff at DEM, again, with the lens of energy and environment. So with that in mind, if you don't mind, I have to spend just a few minutes perhaps listening, but I'll put my email in the chat. If you have any thoughts after this meeting about anything you'd like to talk about and perhaps offer some advice on how to direct, one, this small group, and two, within the governor's office on some of these issues. So I'll stop there and open up the floor a little bit and ask folks to ask questions or help me out a little bit.
Paul, I presume that one of the topics that and you didn't mention it, but it'd have to be up there, would be the whole renewable energy, solar expansion and into, forest lands, or how that's going to play out in the future. Is that?
Yes, yeah, we did talk about that, and one of the outcomes of that yesterday was I forgot who, but somebody made the suggestion we need somebody from OER. I should have mentioned to come in and advise us also somebody who opposes all of this stuff. That's not too difficult to find. I should have mentioned that the group of people, there's about 12 of us from just about every different sector you can think of. Environmental, I think I'm the only tree hugger there. Industry, there's a lobby, there's a person who lobbies for the bottling industry and the wholesale distributors of wine and booze and beer. And there are a few town council folks there. Anyway, yeah. So I'll just stop and listen.
Well, Paul, one thing I would bring up is with this signing of the climate bill. Presumably, that's going to dramatically ramp up the pace of renewable energy production and storage too. So thinking about how that's going to affect forests and what we can do vis-a-vis that to make sure that forests or land protection is included in the big plan.
Did you all get the letter from Janet Coit? Did you all get the email from Janet Coit about the Act on Climate legislation? If you didn't, if somebody can send it around, it was a good letter. Amanda?
Well, I would just add to the mix, now that the Act on Climate has passed, and that's good work to everybody who worked so hard on that. Forest conservation is still not on, as a means to implement the Act on Climate, is still not high on people's radar screens, and it really needs to be. So at a minimum, if the governor's office can embrace the Forest Conservation Act that's currently pending, I'll report on that later. But there's a lot in there that could really benefit Rhode Island. And I think the time to act on that is now.
Yeah, so we have two opportunities to talk about issues. One is verbally during an hour and a half Zoom call once every 2 weeks. The other way is by putting stuff on a Google Sheet. So I've added that to the Google Sheet, that the governor's office should embrace the current legislation on the Forest Conservation Act.
So I keep coming back in a lot of conversations to the New England Forestry Foundation's information about, I'm blanking on what it's called, but their initiative to, paired with the Forest to Cities, the initiative to have forests managed for carbon and wildlife at the same time. And it's something that I think if we pitched it right, if we were careful about it, there's an economic benefit to that. There's a meeting climate change goals aspect to that. I just think it's really laid out well what the value in doing that is.
Amanda, if you can summarize that, or all of you can summarize that and send it to me, I'll make sure it gets at the very least on the list of stuff, the Google sheet.
I don't know if Amanda, if you've seen it, but the New England Forestry Foundation just put out a draft report. It hasn't been widely circulated, but I have a copy of it and I'd be happy to share it with you, Paul. But Amanda, that's a great point, because I know the new governor really embraces small businesses. And I think this Forest to Cities program can check off a lot of boxes. It can support new small businesses in the forest products industry, and also help build affordable housing.
Just wanted to add, Paul, I think it's great to have somebody from OER join your conversations, but they're not going to be focused on forest protection. So having, I think, a parallel person, TJ, or somebody from DEM who can be the spokesperson for forests would be my recommendation, and do them both together.
Yeah. So after, yes, the short answer is yes, and I'm working on that too. We all want to get RIDM in there as well, in different ways. Forestry, agriculture. There were 2 or 3 other departments. I can't remember right this minute, but yes.
One thing I would add to that is, I don't know if it's worth doing, but in the Resilient Rhode plan, there are a number of times where forests and open space are mentioned. So maybe having a conversation about like outlining where those sentences or those phrases are in that plan, and seeing if there's a mechanism for implementing anything that's written down. Like there's a lot of language that talks about the importance of protecting open space and forests, but there hasn't been a lot of action, so I think
what's interesting about this group, and the feeling I'm getting is that they want immediate things. They want something that they can do before January of 2022. That's what I keep, that's why that was so evident yesterday in yesterday's conversation. What can we do right away?
Paul, how long will your involvement go on with this committee?
Yeah, it's 100 days from inauguration, so count the days.
Okay.
And not that many. I think we've got eight sessions left. 6, 7, or 8 sessions left.
Might that lead into anything else for you, or is that going to be the end of
Yeah,
that?
I want to be secretary of the future. Get rid of the secretary. Get rid of the lieutenant governor's office, and I want to be secretary of the future. But that's next year. Can't talk about it today. All right. Well, I got to turn into a lab guy. So you got my email. Please reach out if anything comes up, and I do mean anything within energy and environment. If there's a report out there, a study, I've been using the OER reports, the Brattle Group reports, as a way to introduce people, and the eyes glaze over, and that's, oh boy, it's rough. So if you can send me something in summary, that would be good. All right, thanks for this opportunity. I
Thanks,
gotta
Paul.
go. All right,
Thanks,
see you
Paul.
later.
Thanks, Paul.
Great to have a Woodland Partnership member on the committee.
All right, thanks.
All right. Again, we started the meeting just a bit early, as Paul needed to move on to his class. Why don't we just go around and do our quick round of introductions, for the benefit of everyone. We'll save partner updates for later, but I'll start out. Christopher Riley, the co-coordinator of the Woodland Partnership, and I divide my time between working for the University of Rhode Island, supporting NRCS, in my practice, Sweet Birch Consulting. Let's go on to Kate.
Hello, Kate Sales, co-coordinator of Rhode Island Woodland Partnership. work for the Northern Rhode Island Conservation District, and forestry for the birds through our Rhode Island RC&D. Thanks.
We'll just follow along the squares here in my screen. Let's go to Scott.
I'm Scott Millar, the Director of Conservation and Community Assistance with Grow Smart Rhode Island.
Alana.
Hey everyone, Alana Russell. I'm the URI Biocontrol Lab Manager and the Rhode Island FEMC State Coordinator.
Thanks. And David.
I'm David Gregg. I'm the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Natural History Survey.
Meg.
Hi, everybody. Meg Kerr, the Director of Policy at the Audubon Society of Rhode Island.
Paul.
Paul Dolan, Area Director, Rhode Island Resource Conservation Development Council.
And TJ.
Everyone, TJ Boudreau. I'm the Deputy Chief of the Division of Forest Environment at DEM. Thanks.
Thanks. Amanda.
Hi, Amanda Freitas with the Rhode Island Wildlife Action Plan. I'm a community liaison, and that's a partnership position with the Rhode Island Natural History Survey and Rhode Island DEM Division.
Thanks. Patrick.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pat Langloy. I'm a first-year MESM student at URI and a new hire with the Southern Rhode Island Conservation District. So.
Thanks. Good to have you here again. And finally, Fern, if you'd like to introduce yourself. Maybe not finally.
Hi, I'm Fern Graves. I'm the Forest Stewardship Program Coordinator with Rhode Island Division of Forest Environment.
Thanks. And Lou, if you're logged on, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Lou Allard. I'm the Urban and Community Forestry Program Coordinator with Division of Forest Environment.
Thanks. We've got a good crew here today. And this is the meeting where we're going to focus on our involvement with the Forest Ecosystem Monitoring Cooperative and get an update on what's been going on in current projects from Rhode Island's FEMC representative, Alana Russell. She's up for doing double duty. Of course, we heard from her last month about the spotted lanternfly. So we appreciate your being back this month to bring us up to date about what's going on with the FEMC, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Christopher. So let me just start sharing my screen.
I made you co-host, so it shouldn't be a problem. There you go.
Great. And presentation view. Okay, great. Thanks a lot. I hope nobody's too sick of hearing my voice after these back-to-back meetings. But today I want to, like Christopher said, update everybody on the forest ecosystem monitoring projects that have been going on. So I know that the Woodland Partnership is pretty well acquainted with the FEMC, so I don't think I need to spend too much time going over the mission and the goals of FEMC. But I would like to do a little bit of a recap on that because I know we have a few new faces, or at least one here, and maybe just get us all on the same page. I don't think this presentation will take as long as the normal time allotted for the focal topics of these meetings, but I think that's a good opportunity to leave a little bit of time for discussion or questions, definitely because I think the Woodland Partnership voice in the whole FEMC is definitely a very important voice to have there, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on a few things. So to start off, I will reintroduce FEMC. So FEMC, the Forest Ecosystem Monitoring Cooperative, is a cooperative effort to gather and synthesize trends in forest ecosystem health across the region. And this is done by providing unique, nimble, and high-quality analytical and monitoring services. And this is done in the frame, these long-term trends are looked at in the frame of looking at the interdisciplinary relationship of physical, biological, and chemical components of forest ecosystems. So that is the whole look at soil to sky, not just the forest, but all those major components of that. And so the FEMC, the major funding partners of FEMC is Forest Parks and Recreation of Vermont, the Forest Service, and UVM. and FEMC staff is housed at UVM, and then there's a structure where the state partnership committees participate with FEMC and help with this joint committee process. So I'll explain that a little bit in more detail later. FEMC is sort of built on like 3 main building blocks. That first one being ecosystem monitoring. So that's really looking at the conditions and drivers in forest ecosystems. The next one is support of a collaborator network. So FEMC hosts an annual meeting that gets a lot of these collaborators together to share information. And also FEMC works with state and joins together state committees. So that communication is really on that region-wide basis. And lastly, there's data archive, access, and synthesis. And here, this is a main component of FEMC where they have a data archive repository, which is a space for discipline-specific and regionally relevant focused data of forest ecosystem-related stuff that they then use to inform or help guide some of the tools and products that they put out. So they have a lot of publicly accessible tools and products that are really helpful in monitoring and sharing data on forest ecosystem health. So these main building blocks are supported by some main programs, the major ones being a forest health monitoring program, regional data monitoring and collaboration projects, and state directed sprint projects. So that's really kind of the meat of it. But they also have other projects, other monitoring projects kind of based on the needs of other states or other focuses, so that, you know, they do a lot of different other monitoring projects and fee service projects. They also host that annual conference I mentioned and maintain that forest ecosystem monitoring data archive. Something new to the structure of FEMC as of 2021 is the concept of state coordinators. So that's where my role comes in. Starting this past December, I became the state coordinator for Rhode Island. So that's a position that is contracted by DEM Division of Forestry for 50% of my time. And my role here, what I contribute to, is to help execute the regional work of FEMC, convene and support a state partnership committee, work with FEMC and partners on those state-directed sprint projects, contribute to the collection of forest health monitoring data, and promote the tools and outputs of FEMC through trainings, workshops, and presentations. So as I'm talking, I kind of thought if you guys wanted to think about if there was any need among your organizations or other cooperators or partners for FEMC to give a workshop or presentation to share some of the information about their tools and products, definitely, you know, speak up or let me know, or shoot me an email later, because they're always willing to do that. I also help review applications to the Ecosystem Monitoring Fund, which I'll talk a little bit more about later in the presentation. And then just keeping up with regular correspondence with FEMC staff and percolating that information out to the rest of the partners and committee members. So I know the Woodland Partnership is definitely familiar with the concept of State Partnership Committee, as you were the stand-in committee for FEMC last year. But just a refresher, the role of the State Partnership Committee is to define state projects, contribute to regional project development, and help implement regional and state projects. So each of the 7 participating FEMC states have a state partnership committee that help guide some of these decisions and speak up for what's important in their state. The concept here for sprint projects, the state partnership committee really drives the conversation and the discussion for what's needed for those 1-year state-led sprint projects, and they help establish that, and FEMC helps implement it. In terms of the larger regional projects, the State Partnership Committee does have a voice in that, so that can help inform the decisions for what the regional projects should be for future years. So that's why I think we're in a really good position here to have a discussion with the Woodland Partnership, so that that information can be brought to the table, and the State Partnership Committee can then share that information with FEMC. So this year, what's new is that the State Partnership Committee, we have convened a standalone committee for the state partnership, and it consists of 12 members. We do have representation from DEM, Division of Forest Environment, Fish and Wildlife, Agriculture, and Water Resources. That we also have representation from URI, Department of Plant Sciences, the Natural History Survey, the Woodland Partnership, and the Northern Rhode Island Conservation District, and Nature Conservancy. So this year we did convene twice for 2 winter meetings. The first one was really just an introduction to give to the group to talk about what FEMC is, and then the second one is where we convene to discuss and select a sprint project topic for 2021. So to move on to some updates, well, I want to talk a little bit first about the regional projects that have been proposed for 2021. There's really 3 main ones that Rhode Island is participating in. That first one being a regional assessment of browse and its impact on forest vegetation. The second one is monitoring the impacts of recreation on forest ecosystems. And that third one is helping establish and expand a forest health monitoring program. So I'll actually go into a little bit more detail about that last one first. So the Forest Health Monitoring Program has been established by what was formerly the Vermont Monitoring Cooperative that then became FEMC. They had a monitoring plot network in Vermont that they've been conducting annual forest health monitoring visits at each year. I think shortly after that, it was expanded to Massachusetts, but essentially what's new for 2021 is that FEMC wanted to expand that network to 200 plots that comprised all of the 7 participating FEMC states, so including Rhode Island. The objective of this forest health monitoring plots is to, I think, sort of complement the FIA monitoring analysis that's happening, but it is a little bit different. Here, the forest health monitoring is aimed to be conducted on an annual basis, as opposed to on a longer cycle like FIA, and be done on a permanent plot network, which captures information on crown condition, browse, invasive plants, regeneration, tree demography, and such. So this would be FEMC crews that are deployed each summer, going out to these plots in each state and taking down this information. One way that this differs a bit from FIA, or is a little bit more specific than FIA, is that FEMC is really aiming to for the detection of subtle signs of stress or change that may be missed with like longer monitoring cycles like FIA. And because of that, FEMC is really motivated to get this data out and be publicly accessible and widely available very shortly after the information has been taken down. So they're hoping to publish the annual report about 3 months after each year's monitoring has been conducted. And in that way, people can have wide access to the current year data and also long-term data as it comes through. And this definitely benefits, there's a benefit there because it can aid in research priorities, or identifying research priorities or geographic areas of interest of forest health concern, and also serve as a template for future monitoring services. So what they've been doing for 2021 is trying to expand that plot network and establish these plots in each of the states. So more specifically, to update you on the status in Rhode Island, we've been establishing these plots. That's one of the main things that I've been doing this past winter and spring, is taking a look. FEMC had proposed some plots based on some previous data that they had, and I was tasked with going out there and ground truthing them or finding other suitable sites. So really, again, to emphasize, FEMC's interest here is really assessing changes on the tree level, as opposed to a little bit more broader. To align with the sampling intensity of the other states that already had established plot networks, FEMC proposed to set up 7 plots in Rhode Island. And that was based on a criteria of a couple different things. They wanted to use tree species abundance data from the FIA analysis, so forest type data to establish which forest types we should be, each of these 7 plots should comprise. And then from there, they wanted to give priority to plots that perhaps had historical monitoring data already, so previously incorporated into a plot network or had other monitoring data. So for example, they wanted to use a few retired FIA plots. However, one major thing that they were interested in is establishing these plots that were on public land and obviously forested land, and preferably unmanaged land. So those criteria helped narrow down. Some of those old FAA plots ended up being on private land, so we had to drop them and look for other ones. So you may have, I think there were some emails sent out a while back asking people in the Woodland Partnership if they knew of any possibly good properties that we could establish these plots on. What FEMC asked, based on the abundance of tree species in Rhode Island, the distribution, they asked for 1 eastern white pine plot, 2 red oak, white oak, hickory plots, 1 scarlet oak plot, 1 red oak plot, and 2 red maple plots. So that was my goal. We're still in the phase of finalizing that. I have been out to each of the plots and have established and looking, we're in a pretty good position, but based on the criteria of having easily accessible forested conservation land, the only difference between what FEMC asked for and what I was able to produce is we have 2 scarlet oak sites rather than 1 scarlet oak and 1 red oak site. Though I know there's plenty of red oak sites out there, just based on what I could find. So if you guys know of any good red oak sites, definitely speak up, because I'd be interested to hear about that. To shift gears, I will talk about the second main regional project. This is definitely one that FEMC is investing a lot of time in. That's the regional assessment of browse and its impacts on forest vegetation. So the workflow is kind of spelled out here of the way that it was established in the work plan. First, FEMC wants to host workshops to identify key data sets and analyses that are relevant in this project. Then any regeneration data and methods that they have established, they want to add that to the Northeastern Forest Regeneration Data Network, and that's a tool that FEMC has established previously. They want to use these data to develop a guidebook for developing regeneration inventory methods, and then compile suitable data to inform the browse assessment. And all of that sort of homework will be used to then identify spatial gaps in this project to then collect impact data to fill in those gaps. When all that's done, there will be a white paper and online material assessing the patterns and trends published, and then these findings will be published and shared with cooperators in regional and state meetings. So that's the general workflow of what they're hoping to accomplish with this project. We're definitely still in the early stages, as this is to be conducted between 2021 and 2022. So right now, FEMC is really just focusing on identifying key data sets and analyses that could be used to inform this project. So what they have done so far is done literature review and talked to some direct contacts about compiling known methods related to, the assessment of browse and its impact on forest vegetation. And what they've tasked the state coordinators and partnership committee in doing currently is identifying key contacts to engage in workshops. So these would be workshops that FEMC would host and reach out to these key contacts, that people that might be good in having further discussion and contribution to the knowledge base to help inform the movement of this project. So that's really what I wanted to maybe even open up for discussion now with the Woodland Partnership, or if you guys want to think about that, shout something out at the end of this presentation or shoot me an email later, really in any form. I just kind of wanted to ask the group if you guys know of any contacts to recommend that may be involved with this type of work. So people that have opinions or relevance to these topics, which could be work related to deer population dynamics, specifically focusing on browse impact to vegetation, possible exposure locations that could be used for fieldwork data and integration, and I know we have some there. current work using any of the browse assessment strategies FEMC has identified, or any other concerns related to browse in our state. So this could be any of you guys on this call right now, or any of your cooperators or partners. I just kind of wanted to throw it out there if any light bulbs went off immediately, or if not, I can continue.
Alana, we've got reports for the Forest Healthworks projects, deer exclosures and deer studies that we did at Alton Jones, and there's a report on the deer exclosure at Norman Bird Sanctuary. So I can, they have data, their data appendices and stuff behind them. So plus then the summary reports. So those are available.
Okay, David, would you be comfortable or have interest in being put on that list if I put you on? Or
I'm not really an expert on that. I just happen to know about these two reports. I'm an expert on digging these two reports out and making people read them.
Yeah. Okay.
We can talk, but yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk. Yeah, and I'd like to see them. And I do want. Go ahead, Christopher.
So Providence Water has had a deer management program going for about 10 years now that includes a vegetation monitoring component. It's an important part, along with the managed hunt. And my former colleague, Rob McMillan, is the senior forest supervisor there. I think he'd be a great person to contact for this.
Okay. Go ahead, Mark.
I second Christopher's info there on having Rob McMillan be participating in that. I think he's quietly been, gathering lots of information about that over the years. He manages the deer hunt program there at Providence Water. RIFCO, you may be aware that, we just put up a small project with a slash wall at our woodlot in Foster, which would be available for future. We just put it up this past year, so it'd be available for future data gathering. But Jeff Ward over at University of Connecticut, actually Connecticut Ag Experiment Station, not the university.
Right.
But I don't know if you know Jeff Ward, but he'd be a great person to include in that, because he's been doing all that kind of research and outreach stuff on deer browse.
Right, and Jeff is a co-state coordinator for Connecticut FEMC, so he's been really active with that. And I don't mean to put both Mark and Christopher on the spot, but we're considering and had added your names to these lists. If either of you are not comfortable with that, we can take that off. But I think also adding Rob to that list is a great idea.
That'd be great.
Sounds good.
Alana, I know you already have Dylan Ferreira, the deer biologist at Fish and Wildlife, but I'm thinking maybe you might want to add John Vale, the habitat biologist. And then also at the risk of adding people that it's not my business to add, you might want to add the old habitat biologist, because he's in Connecticut now. So, and he has a pretty good depth of knowledge of the land. And
Okay.
that is Tanner Steves.
I think that's an excellent suggestion for getting the, sort of the more dialogue with the wildlife management community on this. So we're not having our own separate siloed conversations.
Yeah, thank you. Those are great contributions. It's a interesting concept what they've been asked us to do, that to comprise this list of contacts without necessarily reaching out to these people. So it feels a little sneaky, but these are really great contacts. So thank you. All right, I can move on if nobody else has any others to add for this one. Thanks for that. All right, so shifting gears, pretty similar though. The third regional goal, regional project for this year is sort of more of exploration or scoping project, which is looking at monitoring the impacts of recreation on forest ecosystems. So the workflow here that's been mapped out would be first to identify primary concerns related to recreation on the impacts of forest condition and health, then summarize the state of that knowledge, to then inventory any known digital or paper sources of raw data on recreation rates and impacts, and then summarize all of that knowledge, identify gaps in monitoring data, so that then it can be opened up for looking at options for continued work. So this is a less emphasis on this regional project and more so on that browse one, but still FEMC wants to put some effort towards this. So again, we're in the early stages of this where they're really just identifying primary concerns and then summarizing that. And again, FEMC would like to hold a workshop to identify the key contacts to engage there. So for here, what I want to ask you guys is if you knew of any key contacts that may have some expertise or opinion even in this type of work. So work related to trail usage and trail system impacts, projects related to comparison of ecosystem health impacts by recreation type. If there's any prominent organizations that you know of that collect specific recreation type information like ledgers and hunting permit information, or anybody that has an opinion or not expertise on what are the primary ecosystem condition concerns when thinking about the impacts of recreation in our state.
What about Roy Najecki from the Land Trust? He's the trail guy. He might be a good resource.
That sounds great.
From the state,
Oh, sorry.
Will Walker is kind of managing, Fern, correct me if I'm wrong, managing the recreational permits and stuff with the state, I think. But historically, I mean, Jay Aaron, who retired a couple of years ago, has a wealth of knowledge of that whole field with, through his job with the state forestry.
Would any of the Division of Forestry people have a contact for him?
Yeah, we can reach out to him. The good thing is, since Will has taken over, things have become more written down. So we have data to show you for permits and things like that. I mean, Jay's got a lot of good historical information and stuff like that, contacts otherwise you can talk to, but we have some data that we can send you that you can look at. And you might want to reach out to a few of those groups. I mean, specifically probably the Appalachian Mountain Club that does a lot of work in our management areas, but I'll give you Will's information and then you can branch out from there.
Great.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest the Narragansett chapter of AMC is a good group to include.
Oh, Alana, I can't remember. I think I mentioned it. Maybe it was in the FEMC committee meeting that the brook trout people have done a lot there. So, and I guess Corey Peltier at DEM might be your best contact because he would network with those people.
Okay, yeah, that's great. I do remember you mentioning that, but it's good to have a contact for that. I appreciate getting those names. I think that from the other states, there hasn't been that much participation. So really, even if we feel like it's a bit of a stretch, I think it's a good jumping off point to share with FEMC, since I don't know how much feedback they've gotten from other states. All right, so I can move on then. Thank you. So I'd like to move on to do a little bit of an update on sprint projects. So as a reminder, the sprint projects are those smaller rapid assessment analysis or monitoring projects that address a specific state need. So they are they're driven by state needs and decided upon generally by the State Partnership Committee and then implemented by FEMC. So first, we do have the 2020 Rhode Island Sprint Project, which was decided upon by this group last year. Which ended up being the development of an online oak resiliency assessment tool. And I didn't know if Christopher, I don't mean to put you on the spot, if you would like to give an update on this, because I think you could probably do it better than me. If not, I can give a little bit of an update on the status. It's up to you what you'd be more comfortable with. just kind of short.
Could talk about it a little bit, or have been involved with it. The rollout has been delayed a little bit, but anticipated late this spring, early this summer. But it's intended as a tool that foresters or land managers or the more sort of coverts type or master landowners could use to assess the vulnerability and adaptive capacity of their oak forests, and you'll be able to to go out and there's a questionnaire for assessing different traits such as forest canopy health, amount of invasive species, some questions, getting an adaptive capacity, and it's going to try to give you some results on how your the site that you're looking at may compare to others, and to highlight some of the most significant impacts that have come up, and possible management pathways or approaches. It's not intended to be prescriptive. We're working with the Northern Institute for Applied Climate Science on this as well. They are involved because they believe that this could be applied in other ecosystems as well. But it's the first place that it's being tested out. As I think I've mentioned, we're going to be looking for some some early tool testers to get out there in the field and give us some feedback and see how this works. I think there'll be a number of you are at the meeting now, and potentially this could be a focal topic for an upcoming Woodland Partnership meeting. That's kind of what I have in a nutshell, Alana.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I thought that you might be able to say it better than me, but I was given the opportunity to kind of browse the assessment and look at the questionnaire, and it seemed really user friendly and like a good tool to be sharing with landowners and the public. So thank you. To move on, to give a little update on the selection of the 2021 sprint project. This obviously hasn't been started yet. I think FEMC is trying to wrap up 2020 before they start 2021. We convened, like I said, about a month or two ago, the State Partnership Committee to talk about selecting a topic for 2021. There were a lot of great ideas that were brought up, and many of them are, should be considered for future sprint projects or other types of projects in collaboration in the future. What we decided upon, narrowed it down for this year, we selected a data rescue project, which is rescuing the data of statewide forest health data. The justification behind this is that there are historical forest health data sets, amongst our various agencies, institutions, and organizations that exist in paper and antiquated technology forms that don't really do us much good being there, and they're not very accessible, and we're certainly not really able to share them between our groups. And there's a need to translate those, therefore, to modern technology. I think this is a really good jumping off point for one of the early Rhode Island sprint projects, because it can help kind of assess the state of our forest health data that we have before we're too far into the FEMC. So the extent still needs to be scoped out by FEMC to see what they can really implement, but generally the idea would be that they could identify, centralize, digitize, archive, and share existing data sets related to forest health. And those data sets that are selected and digitized would be uploaded to the FEMC data archive that I mentioned before, and I'll show you a little bit more detail about that a few slides down in the presentation. The real benefit and outcome from this would be broadly accessible forest health data that could provide insight into current and historical trends or gaps in the knowledge base that we have for forest ecosystem data, forest health data. One example of that was brought up is historical gypsy moth data that we have just printed on paper. That would be a nice complement to future work with gypsy moths that we do currently. So the homework I wanted to task the Woodland Partnership with is just asking the question, or have you think about if you know of any data sets that could be considered for this project. Again, like I said, FEMC I don't think is ready to act on this yet, but if you just kind of get the gears going and think about if there's anything that your organizations or groups have that would benefit from this, definitely let me know.
A question for you: does the data, have to be statewide, or could it be something that could be on a smaller acreage but inform or be helpful for statewide management?
Yeah, I think that we'd be open to seeing really what's out there and scoping that first. Of course, just really seeing what's available and what has the need. I think that would certainly qualify for it if there was a smaller scale, not just statewide, that would present value to having that in digital form to share widely and in the future.
So we're going back to Providence, water again, or both, Mark and I have, worked there, of course, but there's, decades of records from foresters going back to the early 20th century that are, still, some of them are, just in handwritten notebooks, and I think could be very valuable to digitize with some help. I could try reaching out to them to see if they're interested.
Absolutely, that sounds exactly like that. So I can kind of coordinate a little bit more with, the director, Jim Duncan, and see really what their status is, and maybe we can loop you in when they're ready for that. I think that would definitely be of interest there.
Alana, I think I mentioned before the Forest Healthworks project's invasive mapping. So there's a report, a text report, but there's also a geodatabase, and that would be something that would be good to bring forward technologically, because I think it's on CD.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. I think that's really great too. And it's hard to believe that CD is starting to become considered antiquated.
You also have quite a bit of knowledge from Forestry. Did it for years on a gypsy moth survey, but prior to them taking it over, the Division of Agriculture did a gypsy moth survey, a windshield survey throughout the state for decades.
Right, I think that'll be, considering all of that, would be definitely a really good target for us.
Yes.
How about fire?
Sure, yeah, I think, yeah, there's must be probably historical fire records that
That's where the state forestry would come in, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, we have all of that information, and recently it's all been digitized as well, so it's better than it was with just hard copy maps and things like that. Yeah. Really nice.
Great. I'm going to compile a list of those. And again, I think it's up to FEMC to really know what the scope of what they can accomplish, and maybe not all of them they'll be able to do, but I think these are really great things to bring to the bring to the forefront so they know what's out there. So yeah, shoot me an email if you guys think of anything else or anything comes up. I definitely, want to keep kind of open lines of communication here. Then just kind of quickly, a few other updates. First, the Ecosystem Monitoring Fund. So I think it was earlier this week, I sent out an email about the Ecosystem Monitoring Fund. So this is a new funding opportunity through FEMC to support maintaining critical monitoring in the region. So broadly, what the goal is to support the collection, aggregation, analysis, and utilization of forest ecosystem monitoring information to better understand historical trends and future directions of the forested landscape of the Northeast. So types of projects that could be supported by this funding could be novel analysis of monitoring data, expanding existing monitoring, piloting a monitoring program, upgrade monitoring, current monitoring for comparability, bridge some funding if there's a bit of a gap there, help resurvey or make more robust infrequent monitoring, or contribute to the purchase of some data logging equipment. So FEMC, a little bit more detailed, has this year $100,000 available to support projects of up to $25,000 for up to 2 years, and that would be beginning this year. So personnel from universities, nonprofit, state, tribal, or private organizations located within one of the FEMC member states are encouraged to apply. So that does include Rhode Island, or if some of that work is being done in some of the other FEMC states as well. And I just kind of wanted to throw it out there again for you guys. I encourage you to consider that for your organizations or to share with other cooperators. Unfortunately for this year, the deadline is in about 3 days. So it's April 18th at 5 p.m. So maybe I don't think I've given you much time. It was pretty quick announcement when it came out to really write proposals. But if you have a proposal in mind or can throw something together quickly, definitely contact Alyssa Schuett. She's a FEMC community engagement staff member to submit proposals or ask any questions. And this funding, they're intending to have renewed each year to do this funding opportunity again. So I imagine that you'll be getting an announcement next year if you have something in mind, but maybe you don't have time to formulate that for this year. And lastly, I talked a lot about the Forest Ecosystem Monitoring Data Archive, so I just kind of wanted to touch base on it again. I'm sure you guys are probably familiar with it from other previous FEMC presentations, but I think it's just a neat tool and one of the many cool features that FEMC has publicly available on their website. So the data archive is a research grade data repository for the region. Historically, FEMC had this data repository in essentially like a paper catalog form, but they did digitize it. Some of the features of it are that it has a high quality metadata system and fine-tuned sharing and editing controls. So this is a pretty neat feature because you guys are able, if you do have some data sets, you can upload them to the data archive that can then be accessed by other states, you know, to kind of consider things on a region-wide basis, or you can sign up with FEMC to have access to the data archive to then be looking at these data sets yourself to see if there's anything out there that may help inform some of your projects or decision making, or anything like that. FEMC mainly uses the data archive. It helps drive many of the tools and products that they do produce. So things like the Northeastern Regeneration tool has come from some of the data in the data archive. And others. So I did place the URL there at the bottom, but I encourage you to kind of check it out. It's definitely a neat thing. Since
Alana?
It's, go ahead.
So I actually mentioned this and the data rescue sprint project to a couple of people the other day who had data that I thought might be suitable, and they said they weren't interested because of security concerns. And you know, it sounds great to like share data all over the place, but sometimes people look at that and think, no, that's actually the wrong thing to do. So have you been part of any discussions on like what kinds of data security or other security issues are being dealt with by FEMC?
That's an excellent question. I don't know specifically off the top of my head. I imagine they have gotten that, and I will look into that so I can share that. Because yeah, you're right. We shouldn't really be promoting anything unless we really know the total extent and security of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few. This wasn't in the context of NatureServe, and Rhode Island is actually not participating in NatureServe, but a lot of, you know, to the extent that, let's say, rare species or rare natural communities are forest monitoring data, you know, there states that have relationships with NatureServe may have exclusive, you know, data sharing relationships with other parties that aren't FEMC, and that's just one of the issues. I mean, you know, heritage data is locked down to differing degrees in different states, and so that's, you know, that's kind of the other issue.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good point, and I think they're encouraging you to share this data if it helps also fulfill, you know, for example, with certain grant projects, fulfilling, sharing the data on a public basis or something like that. But I think
You don't have to make a portal yourself. You can take advantage of this and meet your obligation to make the data public. I mean, it obviously has benefits, but it's not everybody looks at it and goes, hey, that's awesome. Because
absolutely, yeah. I think you're right. And I'll look into that because I just don't know specifically how to answer that, but I imagine they may have a response for that.
I'm sure they've had this question.
Thanks for bringing that up, though, because I think it is a good thing to frame it in that, if we're going to be talking about this. Does anybody else have any comments concerning that? Well, I believe that is my last slide, so I actually don't know how much time there is. I see it is 2 o'clock. Anyway, if I want to open up if there were any other questions. I'm glad that we were able to have a little bit of discussion here and there. But again, I just want to remind you, think about it if anything comes up in your brains for key contacts to share for a deer browse project or the recreation project, or if there's some data sets that you think would be relevant to be considered for the 2021 sprint project. And so thanks y'all for listening to me, and I'll take any questions.
Yeah, Alana, thank you for that. That was great. I was wondering, has the FEMC done any work in collaboration with conservation districts in New England? And if so, what sorts of projects it has supported?
That's a good question. I imagine they do. I personally feel overwhelmed with how much collaboration and data that they really have compiled. So I'd really have to look into specifically what they have done. I don't know, Kate, if you know more specifically, since you have been involved with FEMC for over a year now.
I think Kate stepped away just for a moment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll say I think that this is all new territory in Rhode Island. We are one of just Patrick, if you're fair knowledge, I mean, we're one of the late adopters in New England for this. So they kind of came and approached us and Connecticut to join in the collaborative because we weren't member states. So this is all sort of new for us. I don't believe anything has really been done in Rhode Island. It's kind of been a gap. So they're trying to fill in that gap in New England with our 2 states.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, TJ. I think I'm pleased that they're incorporating Rhode Island into this, because I think we do have an interesting perspective. Certainly Rhode Island's a lot different than New York or Maine in terms of our forests.
Well, thanks, Alana. I think the FEMC's really hit the ground running and doing a good job of getting involved with projects that are highly relevant to people or working on forests and forestry issues in our region, which was the intent, and that are somewhat different from some of the more northern New England oriented projects that they had been focusing on. And I think that's great. And it's exciting to be involved and see how it moves forward.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward, again, the communication lines are open. I think that the Woodland Partnership has a really good role in this, and I'd like to keep that open, just kind of out there if you guys have any input. And I hope, you guys will be open for if I need to reach out for anything. I appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Well, at this point, I think we'll shift to the next item on our agenda, which was the Forest Conservation Act update and discussion of any other legislation and policy. And since Scott has been spearheading some of that work related to advancing the Forest Conservation Act, I thought I might have you start us off, and our discussion can evolve from there.
Sure. I think there's some pretty good news to report. As I think most folks know, the bill has had 2 hearings, one in the Senate, one in the House. Approximately 15 people testified. No one opposed the bill, but we're not taking any chances. So recently, I contacted the Senate President, the Speaker, chairs of both committees, as well as the bill sponsors, sent them just a little friendly email reminding them that this bill is important. Could they please support it? And I asked about 10 others to do the same. And Kate, Christopher, Mark, just to name a few of the Woodland Partnership members that also did the same. And I think that helped. This Monday, Ryan Mulcahy from DEM coordinated a meeting with Representative Speakman, who is the House sponsor. We had a very productive conversation with her. And the bottom line is that she's been told by the chair of House Committee on the Environment that the bill is going to get voted out. So that's very, very good news. That wouldn't happen if the leadership didn't think that the bill had merit. So I've also heard that in the Senate, it's also being viewed very favorably, but remains to be seen, when these bills will get voted out. I'm hoping it's not at the 11th hour, because if there's any amendments to the bill, sometimes you can have different versions in the House and the Senate. So we're trying to get this moving forward sooner rather than later. We're hoping that's the case.
Thanks, Scott. Anybody have anything else they'd like to chime in on about the Forest Conservation Act?
I wanted to kudos to Scott for shepherding this through the process, Scott. You're the key guy here for us, so we appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Yes, indeed.
It's sort of related via legislative connection, but I just wanted to mention Rupert Friday's departure from the Rhode Island Land Trust Council. Rupert has been kind of the eyes and ears for us on Smith Hill for, I don't know what it was, 17 years or 18 years or something like that. And so, it's really, it's all the more valuable to have you, Scott, watching these kinds of things, because you can't be effective up there without a persistent presence and a bit of a roadmap. And Rupert has been that. Meg has been that. You've been that for our kind of community, and so I'm concerned. I want to make sure that Land Trust Council continues to have that role. I think it's really valuable. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the process goes to replace Rupert.
Indeed. Well, Rupert's been a frequent participant in these meetings, and I will be busy, working on legislative stuff right now, but hopefully we'll have him, perhaps next month to give us an update on some of that.
Just one more thing. It's probably overkill, but not taking any chances. I wrote an op-ed to promote the Forest Conservation Act as well. I sent it off about a week and a half ago to the Journal, but it could be another 4 weeks before it gets in. But in the event they don't publish it, at least I can get it into Eco Rhode Island News.
They covered it too in the last couple weeks.
All right. Well, we're all, rooting for this to move forward. Thanks to all these efforts, and I know we're going to be, staying tuned. Keeping tabs on that this spring. Any other legislation or policy related issues that people would like to bring up or talk about at this time?
Does anybody have an update on the status of the revisions to the wetlands regulations? I haven't heard word boo since they had their hearings back couple, 3 months ago, whenever that was.
I'll say from my standpoint, I haven't heard anything either. Internally, we haven't had any conversations unless they're happening outside of us. And if they were happening and Ken was involved, he would have told me too. So I'm not sure if they're still waiting for a mandatory time that they have to, or they have it planned for a certain time. But I don't think you're missing anything because I don't think anything's happened yet.
I was talking to Sue Kiernan the other day, and we didn't really talk about this subject, but she said something like, she started to say, when we get the new regulations enacted, and then she stopped herself and said, if, and then she stopped, and then she sort of went back to when. So I think it's in process, but kind of at a close level right now. So it's not, you haven't missed anything, but it hasn't stopped. How about that?
All right, something else we'll keep on our radar screen as well. And with that, I think we can just move into partner updates. Why don't we start with TJ and what's going on with the Division of Agriculture and Forest Environment?
Yeah, so just a couple things I'll touch on. The consultant group that many of you have talked with or had communications with is actually here this week. So that was very nice. They had their visit. They were supposed to do in December, but because of COVID, everything changed. But I think it's better because we were out for a few days and it was a lot nicer than it would have been if we were driving around in December. So they saw a lot of sites, had some conversations, and we're looking forward to getting some feedback from them in terms of a report, probably the end of this month. I know that they're working on wrapping up some things. I'm not sure when that information is going to be sent out to the public or to partners for review, but it's nice that it's a project that's seeing its end, and I think it's going to have some fruitful products that are going to be able to help our division and help Fish and Wildlife. So they've been a great group of people to work with, and they're really enthusiastic about helping us either get more FTEs or get more funding at the state level. So it's been really good in that regard. So apart from that, we got our federal allocation funding just last week, and there's a couple of things on that that are worth noting. That we got a little bit of bump in our urban and community forestry program funding. So we got an additional $50,000 there. We normally get 200,000, and that's the base minimum, but we got a bump up from that. Not sure if that's going to be a continuous thing or not, but there was some extra money that the feds had allocated, and the decision was to just give the money out to the states rather than doing a competitive process for that chunk of money. So that's good. And then we also have two competitive grants that we're part of. One is a New England-wide grant that is looking at increasing awareness for forest carbon markets in private land ownership. So that's going to be a grant that gives us the funding to train one staff member, essentially the way it's written, to kind of go through the rigmarole of understanding everything that's involved in carbon markets and private land ownership, and trying to get more activity in that avenue in New England. Rhode Island's really small. We have small forest plots. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a stretch, but we're combining efforts with the rest of the New England states to be part of that network. So we're going to be getting some education and outreach to private landowners on carbon markets, which is exciting. And then another one that we got is it's a wildfire risk reduction grant, which is a competitive grant. And that is a grant that should be a 2-year grant that gives us funding to hire a staff person who is going to look at fire risk monitoring for the state. So essentially, if we were at what we consider full capacity for our fire program, we'd have a fire science staff person within the ranger group. Right now, we don't have that position because we just don't have the people. So this grant that we have fills that gap and is going to provide us with a staff person that we're going to hire through a contract to kind of fill the role of the staff person we've been wanting to have for a couple of years now. And they're going to capitalize on some of the other forest fire risk mapping and projects that we've been doing with prescribed burns and things like that. So that's really exciting that we got that. That's a big one. That's a $150,000 grant. So we're thrilled that we got that. We're kind of capitalizing with Nancy. She's really good at writing these grants. And I think we've been able to capitalize on our small size and low staff numbers for a couple of years now and getting some of these grants. I don't know how long that'll last, but right now we're taking advantage of being able to not have a pity party, but just say, you know, Rhode Island lacks capacity. What can you guys do to help us? And it's worked in our favor. So we're really thrilled to have that. So things are moving in that regard. It's good to see that funding has been increased from the federal government and that we're moving forward, and there really hasn't been a hiccup that we've seen, at least as it relates to COVID or financing in that regard. So things are moving forward.
Thanks, TJ. Sounds like a lot going on. Congratulations on the grants and the increase in funding. That's good news.
Yeah.
We'll go over to Mark and Rivco.
Well, we have RIFCO has a spring program coming up, but it'd be at the end of May. So save the date, May 29th. We'll be doing at the RIFCO woodlot, we'll be doing what we were supposed to do a year ago with Kate, right? Doing our Forestry for the Birds program there. So that's on the horizon. Otherwise, I think the carbon topic that you mentioned, TJ, is interesting. I'd like to work, well, RIFCO would like to work in that end with whoever, you know, your grant supports there. Topics like biochar are interesting methods to store carbon, and we'd like to kind of see if that's an opportunity for the small woodlot owner in Rhode Island.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think RIFCO is going to be our kind of main point of contact since it's a landowner assistance outreach program. So, like I said, we still haven't got the official thing signed yet, but we'll be in touch.
Great.
Thanks, Mark. We're talking about DEM related projects. How about you, Lou? What's happening on the urban forestry side of things?
Well, we have our energy saving trees program that went live last Monday, and 1,000 trees were claimed in a couple hours. So that was a nice success, I suppose. And then just upcoming, we have our Arbor Day celebration on April 30th at 10:30 at Hull Street Park in East Providence. And we'll be celebrating our 14 Tree City USAs and 2 tree campuses. So I think that's about it for now.
Nice, thanks. How about David in the Natural History Survey?
Well, the most interesting and exciting thing we've done lately sits at the boundary between forests and agriculture, and that is spadefoot toad, artificial spadefoot toad breeding pools. So the South Kingstown Land Trust, URI, DEM, Natural History Survey, Roger Williams Park Zoo, all collaborated to build 2 additional spadefoot toad breeding pools on a piece of land in South Kingstown, off of Tuckertown Road. So we're gonna fill up your woods with spadefoot toads, which I guess they're good because they help to aerate and mix the soil horizons and all kinds of stuff like that. So now we don't actually have any toads, so that's the dirty little secret. But hopefully there'll be a breeding event and we'll be able to shuffle some toads around. But the pools look really cool, and so there you go. I'm gonna do a video on them as part of our hashtag Natural History Tuesday series on our YouTube channel, and that'll come out next Tuesday, so you'll get to see it.
I want to commend you again on your social media video efforts right now. They're so good.
Right. Mystery of the Purloined Quahog, right?
Mhm.
That one's a hit.
Smash that like button.
Wow, cool. Well, I will keep my eyes open for article about spadefoot toads in the in the media somewhere around the state too. Good stuff. How about you, Amanda?
I've been working on things that mostly aren't useful to you guys yet. I have a talk shortly in the Northeast on maladaptation to climate change. I'm part of a bigger panel, and I'll be talking about solar and wildlife mostly. But I can't share it yet. And then likewise, working with planning and development, bringing in Fish and Wildlife on that landscape scale strategies document, but it's, eventually I'm sure it will go out, or I'll be able to share it. I'm not sure if there'll be a public comment, but I'll be able to share it. But right now it's very much internal. It's still in a draft form. So that's what I've been working on that's not useful to you. And if I could use the rest of my time to ask 2 questions, I would really like to do that. The first one is, I think I know the answer, but speaking about carbon markets, does anyone know of anything kicking around with NRCS, or has anyone approached NRCS about that being maybe a funding source? I think it would be something
that RCPP RFP that you sent around, Kate, mentioned that carbon markets could be a target of that RCPP. So
yeah,
there's that.
I think that internally they're developing guidance on that, but it's not in a way, besides funding opportunities for projects, it's not in a way that I've heard much about it.
Okay.
I'm sure it's being talked about, but
okay.
Apparently,
Again,
I'm sorry. Apparently, Mass and Vermont NRCS are working on a biochar practice description scenario, or whatever they call them.
okay. Yeah, I really do. I keep circling back to the New England Forestry Foundation's work, and I even plan to mention it if I can get away with it in the talk I just mentioned on solar. Because I see it as a way to just bring in the economic piece and get people thinking about, I'm going to be talking to wildlife biologists, like what are they going to do about the policy, right? So thinking about things that they could do and things that they could plug, and ways that they can sort of frame the conversation. I'm trying to do that, but I just keep going back to that. If we can have this gain steam, durable wood products, long-term sequestration, all of that stuff, if we could have it gain steam in one way or another, I think it'll have a life of its own. But I think we're the ones that need to get it there.
it's definitely a Chris Modisette question, and I have I have my weekly list of follow-ups for him. So I'll add it to that list and hopefully put you in touch.
Thank you. That'd be awesome. The other thing I wanted to ask quick is, TJ had mentioned the stakeholder outreach and you folks having heard from from Group Solutions, and I wanted to make sure that anybody who wanted to hear from Group Solutions did, because I know there were a few glitches. So, or I only know of one glitch, but it was major. So, have you guys heard? Have you had an opportunity to participate?
Has anybody in the landowner forest land? I know this has to do with state lands ownership and management. I'm not exactly sure what the goal is, but is there, as a stakeholder community, are other private forest landowners, have they been interviewed with this process? Or is it strictly like user groups, recreation user groups, fishermen, things like that? I'm not sure.
So it was mainly that, but there was like a general outreach from anybody. So if there was a private forest landowner that wanted to put in their 2 cents in a survey, the opportunity was there. But the specific outreach to have in-depth interviews with private landowners just wasn't the focus because it's not, you know, their work. We've already stretched them way thinner than they thought they were going to do when they first came in. So I think, you know, that was an issue that wasn't really part of the project.
So thank you, because I didn't know the answer to that question. Just to be clear, the scope for forestry was just sort of state lands, acquisition, management, that kind of thing. But the scope for Fish and Wildlife is more soup to nuts. So what are our, you know, starting with what are our legal mandates and are we actually doing those? Do we have the capacity to even meet that? But also what should we be doing? What should we be dropping? Just sort of how are we doing in general? And so if you know, there was a general access survey that I'm sure you all saw, my Rhode Island's coming out. But if you wanted to provide more in-depth information, if you had something you thought was useful, then you can send it to me and I'll pass it along and hopefully it will be heard that way. That said, time is sort of the essence to do that. Thanks.
Thanks, Amanda. Let's go over to Fern. Would you like to provide an update, Fern?
I don't have any updates right now.
Okay, sounds good. How about Paul?
I do have some updates. Our RI Energy program, we're still working on that. We're still putting out our newsletter. And on May 12th, we have an outreach information for people on just what energy programs out there. We're dealing with our geothermal program, and we just received a grant from Rural Development for a partnership with NSAVE to help farmers do energy audits on their program and how to do their paperwork. And we got the coverts program coming up. I have a program on May 22nd, Coverts 2. So it's a 2-hour virtual program on a whole variety of topics. You know, information from URI on migration, Kate with Forestry for the Birds, Christopher with the information on oak resiliency, NRCS talking about some of their programs with the Wetland Reserve Program. And then the Aviathon will be virtually on May 21st. So we're just trucking along.
Good stuff. Sounds like RC&D is comfortable in the virtual world.
Yeah.
Let's move over. How about Patrick?
Yeah, I don't have any updates that I think would be useful to all of you, as I'm still very much in the process of learning how to write farm conservation plans. Other than that, I have been helping my district manager with a proposal to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation for the National Coastal Resilience Fund. Other than that, not much.
Well, thanks. Good to have you here, and you know, helpful to get those updates from what the Southern District is working on, and to fully integrate you into the forestry community here. Scott, do you have any other updates from Grossmore RI?
One other thing to add, that we actually have some good news. As you know, a lot of people have been advocating for the Office of Energy Resources to do some solar siting reform. No need to get into that. But this March, the Office of Energy Resources did something that we're ecstatic about. They actually put out an RFP for the state to purchase renewable energy and made it very clear they would not entertain proposals that were not in developed or disturbed locations. They defined those as brownfields, landfills, rooftops, etc. And they went even a step further and said they wouldn't entertain anything that's on a farm. They wouldn't entertain any project that would impact core forest and or residentially zoned areas. So it pretty much eliminates any solar that would be on a greenfield. with the only exception, it would have to be in an existing manufacturing zone. So I saw that, and in conjunction with Save the Bay, MEG from Audubon, TNC, Rhode Island APA, we wrote a letter to the Office of Energy Resources to sort of to recognize what they did, give them sort of an attaboy, commend their efforts, and say, this is the kind of reform that we're looking for all projects. We're willing to work with you to make this the permanent form of solar siting in Rhode Island. And we sent a copy to the governor's office, and we got very positive feedback from that. So I think the new commissioner, Nick Ucci, is trying to go in the right direction. And this was a big step forward.
Nice, that's promising to hear that. Thanks for sharing with all of us. On to, let's see, Alana, any additional updates that you might have?
Nothing more from me.
Sure. Thanks again for everything earlier. How about Kate?
No updates for me. April Fools. Sorry, just thought that would be appropriate since it's April. Quick updates, Southern New England Heritage Forest, Audubon's about to start doing their surveys. Contracts are in place for those. Forestry for the birds. Mark mentioned the first workshop coming up in May. I've reached out to Tom Bryson and Norman Bird today to kind of start the process for scheduling those workshops as we head into this summer. I'm hoping that we can combine efforts with the Twilight Walk Summer Session series with Rifco on Tom Bryson's property for later this summer. And I've been talking to Chris Modisette and Gary Casabona a little bit about collaborating on our forest professionals workshop. So stay tuned for updates on that. So we still haven't heard back on the RCPP Forest Healthworks Project 2 grant application. We expect to hear by the end of the month. That was the last update from NRCS. It's gone to national, so our state really doesn't have more information. And I sent our partners an email today with a link. There's another RCPP opportunity for alternative funding, which is due at the end of May. So if there's some chance that we don't receive this RCPP grant funding, we can just take the grant that we have and just make it fit the next opportunity. So I don't think a whole lot of work will need to be done there. One important thing I want to talk to you all about today is we know Greg Cassidy is retiring. Not exactly sure when that's going to happen. And I checked in with him at the beginning of this week. I've also talked to him a little bit about scheduling a workshop for May or June to try to solicit some more applications from landowners for another application in the Scituate Reservoir watershed, so that we're prepared for October when their grant application is due. And if we are proactive about it and we start soliciting applications, it will be a smooth transition to at least get an application in for 2021 for next year's funding. I'm concerned that we don't know where Forest Legacy is going to go when Greg leaves. We don't have an indication from DEM unless TJ, Fern, and Lou have any idea about what's happening there. It's currently, I get I've talked to Greg a little bit. It seems like it moved to Greg's wheelhouse about 12 years ago in a transition that happened back then. It's been living with him since then. And now that he's retiring, I'm concerned that one, we're going to lose momentum on soliciting landowner applications and getting another grant funded. And also we have those 12 parcels that are underway in terms of due diligence and getting easements. So how do we ensure that that continues when Greg leaves? We need a strategy, and I'm going to speak to him soon about also scheduling our next legacy technical committee meeting. Because I think that if, most of us are on that committee, if we can really be proactive in that regard for pushing DEM to make a decision about where that's going to go and who's going to do that work, we can stay ahead of the curve and not be caught in 3 months without a way to get work done on those. So if all of you can keep that on your radar, TJ, anything you have?
Yeah, so I mean, all I can say is that I've had conversations with Megan, who is Greg's boss, to tell her the importance of the work that he does, and that it's most likely the position is going to stay in planning and development where it is now. I don't believe it's going to come into forestry, but that doesn't mean legacy is going to go anywhere. I don't want to speak for them exactly, but the person that has that position, I believe, is going to take over the legacy program. I don't think it's going to switch to another staff person. So there might be a gap in where Greg leaves and the new person comes on board. Whether or not that's going to cause any hiccups in the current legacy project, I'm not sure, but we should probably have that conversation with Megan now. And they've also hired a new, he's not new, but he got promoted to be the deputy of planning. They haven't had a deputy in a number of years, but now Art Zeman is their deputy chief. And I'm not sure exactly what his role is and how work gets delegated in planning and development, but have a meeting, probably a small group of us with Megan and Art, just to talk about any gaps that would cause a hiccup since we're actively doing legacy work.
Thanks, TJ. Thanks for that update. That's really helpful. I think the one person I know in planning and development who understands the process for due diligence and how to get an easement done is Michelle Sheehan, but she's pretty flat out. So I don't want to assume that she's going to put that on her plate. Knowing about when that position is going to come up would be helpful to us as well. And again, if we can sort that out with planning and development and also call a technical committee meeting and be a group sounding board, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, and we might not know because Greg might not know when he's retiring because
he doesn't.
With like Kathy, they told her, oh no, you got to stay on for another 6 weeks. We were sorry, like it's just weird how it works.
I mean, it was, a month ago, it was the end of March or August, and now he's uncertain. So, another thing, so this doesn't necessarily have to do with our group, but I think it's important to put it on all of your radars, especially DEM now that it's housed in agriculture. It was really sad news when we lost Pete Susi last year in the Division of Agriculture, who passed away. He was in charge of the farm portion of Farm Forest and Open Space. Between him and Ron Newman, they were the folks who went out to confirm that a farm was a farm and to sign the applications, which then go to the tax assessor for folks in the current use program. We're at we have sort of a pause right now for getting those signatures collected on the DEM side. I know that the Division of Agriculture has just made a push to collect farmer information, specifically produce farmer information. They're working on that. I also don't want this to slip off the radar because I think we have 10 landowners now who put in applications in 2020 who don't have a DEM signature, meaning that they potentially missed out on the current use tax incentives for 2021. We can't drop the ball on this. We have, even though we're forestry related, I would say that this is equally as important. So I want to keep that on your radar as well. I think that's
bring
it.
that up to Ken specifically too, because Pete Susi's position is not going to be filled in
right.
So they might not be aware of those gaps,
And I know Ron hasn't, he's not been feeling well, so I don't want to overwhelm him, but we do need to designate somebody it's like 10 forms to just, the districts have already confirmed that those are a farm based on their records, their maps, and the aerials. So we just need somebody to double confirm and sign.
Okay.
Thanks, Kate, for bringing those, important things to the Woodland Partnership's attention. Definitely important for us all to have those on our radar screen. Just got a couple of small updates. We're waiting to hear back about the climate adaptive forestry McIntyre Stennis grant proposal. Where it is that we might hear this month that would extend the existing Yukon project that's getting off the ground to include Rhode Island as well, with URI and DM partnering and working on a site at the Decopit Preserve, where we'd have 3 different adaptive silviculture treatments and a control, and there'd be sort of training and outreach materials somewhat similar to forestry for the birds. Keep you in the loop on that. I'm also, this spring working with Groundwork Rhode Island on a Pawtucket and Central Falls health equity zone tree planting for climate and health, and that's just interesting to see the products from that larger project being rolled out, the tree equity maps and some of the using the tree planting palettes with species suggestions for planting in particular sites as we go around from site to site. So interesting to have some on the ground involvement in the urban side of things. That's what I've got now. Does anybody else have any questions or updates?
Update on the Oak Resiliency project from anyone? I know there's some workshops coming up. Fern, you're involved in one, but who could provide an update on that for us, please?
Well, there's the rollout of the Oak Resiliency assessment tool. I anticipate that coming late spring or summer. We are hoping to have a meeting, kind of the Oak Resiliency assessment workshop, bringing together foresters, ideally wildlife biologists, others working on the issue. We had hoped to have that this winter. Of course, we couldn't do it in person, and decided to postpone it actually to to next winter, when we may be able to do it in person. There is a landowner webinar series that hopefully, I know you at RIFCO, Mark, we're made aware of that, but it's a series of 3 webinars, focusing on, wildlife, with Brian Hawthorne from Mass Fish and Wildlife, our Fern here is talking about, forestry, and then climate adaptation, with Connecticut Deep Service Forester Andrea Urbano. And there'll probably be some events over the summer. Just what form they'll take shape as is not clear right now. Jeff Ward and the Connecticut Agricultural Station are working away on the sort of the demonstration site and research side of the project. They had hoped to do some field tours of those, but they can't do that. They can't travel outside of Connecticut right now. But that's it in a nutshell. There's also a new Northeast Region coordinator who's come on board with the Forest Stewards Guild, working with Amanda Mahaffey. His name is Logan Johnson from Maine, and you'll be getting to know him through this or other projects.
I forgot an update. So Molly Allard had emailed the group earlier this week about the NRCS listening sessions in each of the conservation districts. If you are interested in voicing your thoughts and concerns about the natural resources concerns that NRCS focuses on in Rhode Island, please feel free to join us at those sessions.
Right. So our next meetings, planned for Thursday, May 20th at 1, right here on Zoom. Kate and I will be conferring about a focal topic speaker. If any of you have ideas or anything that you'd like to present, please be in touch. And until then, I hope you all have a good afternoon. Stay healthy and get vaccinated.
Off to
Thanks.
get my second vaccine right now.
Woohoo!
Great.
Shots, 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 shots.
And for those of us
Awesome.
on the road, we're all set.
Get your
Right.
vaccine.
Thanks,
Be well, everyone.
everybody.
Bye. Thanks,
Bye all,
everyone.
thanks.